Hey there, fantasy owners. Welcome to Lift the Cup Fantasy, or LTC Fantasy as some call it. And we're rolling along with our 21-22 team reviews. Today we're going to look at the Los Angeles Kings, see who led them in different stats for goaltenders, defensemen, and forwards. Who was the biggest fantasy surprise? Who was the biggest fantasy disappointment? And who on the roster was relevant fantasy-wise on a weekly basis? We will continue to have these come out every few days, because no better way to enjoy the fantasy offseason than enjoy the playoffs and talk a little bit of fantasy hockey. Don't forget to subscribe. That way you can catch your favorite team's review. Maybe you want to catch your rivals' review. Maybe you want to catch a team that gets overlooked fantasy-wise on most people's radar, so to speak. Or maybe you want to catch all 32. We'll get right into it. Goaltenders from LA. It was really started off the season. Who led them in games played was Jonathan Quick at 45. Also led them in wins at 23. Goals against average at 2.59 and a save percentage of 910. So some decent numbers from Quick after struggling for a couple of years. Really this season, it started out for 3/4 of the season most anyways. It was Peterson and Quick alternating starts. Then when the playoff push come, Quick really took over that crease and ran with it. D-man stats. Who led them in goals was Drew Doughty. Assists was Doughty and Dursey tied at 24. Keep in mind, Doughty did lead him in points at 31, and he only played 39 games this year. So he put up 31 points in 39 games. So really solid season for the half season that he was healthy for there. Matt Roy led him in plus-minus at plus 24. Mikey Anderson led him in hits at 133. Blocks was Sean Dursey at 121, and Matt Roy led him in shots on goal at 153. Kind of hard to analyze LA's defense this year because, man, were they decimated by injury. At one point, their starting six from the beginning of the year were all out of the lineup, so it's really hard to kind of gauge who was doing well, who was doing poorly, so to speak. Dursey was one that got called up, and he did all right up in the big leagues there. And Doughty, obviously, he is a stud when healthy, but only played 39 games this year. Over into forwards, who led him in goals was Adrian Kempe at 35. Assist was Anze Kopitar at 48. Kopitar also led him in points at 67. Trevor Moore led him in plus-minus at plus 20. Hits was Carl Grundstrom at 134. Anze Kopitar led him in blocks, 71 blocks. That's a lot of blocks for a forward to get in front of a puck there. And Adrian Kempe obviously led him in goals, led him in shots on goal at 247. The top two lines there were good most of the season, but not great. They do play a defensive style of game, so it's not the greatest fantasy options there. They do have some really nice players, will lead you deep into the playoffs, but we're more worried about fantasy points, so they're good but not great, so to speak. Biggest fantasy disappointment? With a low-scoring team, there's going to be disappointments there, but I'm going to veer away from the skaters and look at Cal Peterson. For me, he was the biggest fantasy disappointment. He signed that big extension in the offseason. This is supposed to be the transition from Quick into Peterson, and he never really did take the crease away from Quick for very long. Little stretches where he might get 3-4 starts in a row, but nothing great, and you really expected him to take over in LA, and that just didn't pan out for him this year. Biggest fantasy surprise has to be Adrian Kempe, scoring 35 goals this year. The point totals were okay fantasy-wise, but going 35 goals, his previous career high was 14, so definitely a big jump there, and definitely was a surprise. Who's relevant on a weekly basis for them? Really, it's Drew Doughty and nobody else. To be honest, last half of the season, you can kind of say Quick was, but they were alternating starts, so that's prior to that, so that's not really a weekly basis thing. It's more of a spot start. And Doughty, he's a stud, even though he's getting up there in years played. But 31 points in 39 games, if he was healthy, definitely dress him. Streamers, there were some decent options streamer-wise this year. You could look at Kempe. Kopitar I put down to streamer status. Philip Daniel had a really solid season. Trevor Moore was actually quite surprising how he did fantasy-wise this year also, outside of Kempe. And Victor Arvidsson, he was injury-plagued, but he was good when he was healthy. Do hope you did enjoy the episode. If you did, please remember to hit like, hit subscribe, and remember that notification bell. And we'll be out in a few days with another one there, fantasy owners.